Hello guys and welcome to my project. This project is the comparative analysis of post-apocalyptic theme in films between I Am Legend and 28 Days Later. And now, if you are wondered what will you get out of this video, then let me show you. First, you will understand the concept of apocalypse better. Second, you will learn how the literary elements can be portrayed differently and similarly in both films. Finally, you will see all the cool techniques behind each cinematic effect embedded in the films.
Oh, by the way, the video has two parts. The first part will be literary elements and the second will be cinematic effects.
But before we dig deeper into post-apocalypse, let's learn more on the concept of apocalypse. According to Moon, a researcher at the University at Wisconsin-Milwaukee, he defines apocalypse as a present situation which then leads to a catastrophic event. And some causes for the apocalypse are a deadly pandemic, a nuclear holocaust, a resource depletion, zombies, and many more that will lead to the end of humankind. Apocalypse can also be classified into pre-apocalypse and post-apocalypse. Let's start with pre-apocalypse. Steve Masolver, an author from HuffPost, defines pre-apocalypse as a story where people are doing whatever they can to turn the apocalyptic tide in the still existed world. That means it portrayed the possible end of humanity. Some films of this type can be recognized as Armageddon in 1998 and Cloverfield in 2008. Now, let's talk about our main point, post-apocalypse. Moon, again, defines post-apocalypse as a world or civilization after such a disaster has taken place. It often depicts the aftermath of a world-changing catastrophic event. Post-apocalypse confront us with the fragility of human civilization, which is shown by how humans have to survive through the environment that has suffered from the apocalypse. The first film to be compared is 28 Days Later by Danny Boyle. It was first published in 2002 in the city of London. The story is about Jim, a man who was in coma, woke up in a world full of zombies. He strived to survive with other survivors he had met. The second film is I Am Legend by Francis Rollins. It was first published in 2007. The story is about a plague that kills most of humanity and transforms the rest into monsters. The only survivor, Robert Neville, a US Army virologist, tried to find a cure in the middle of New York City.
Let's dig deeper into the cause of the apocalypse in both films.
It is zombies. Zombies in both films are different and similar at the same time. They both represent the cause of post-apocalypse. However, zombies in 28 Days Later are infected with rage from the experiment. But in I Am Legend, the zombies are infected with virus that fail to cure cancer. Next, let's take a look at the settings. In 28 Days Later, it took place in London. 28 days after the outbreak. You can see in each scene that the city was abandoned not long ago. But in I Am Legend, it took place in New York City. The scene shows that the city was left for a long time, that the nature has already took over the city. Now, guys, let's compare the role of main characters in post-apocalyptic elements. Apparently, both stories shared the same pattern. They, at certain point of the story, will be in despair. But later, they will find hope again. And this is how the main characters would react to post-apocalyptic environment. The outstanding point in these two post-apocalyptic films is the climax. The climax made the main characters to risk their lives in order to save something or someone. Not to mention that the story keeps getting more intense the closer it reaches the climax. Lastly, the most interesting part in the first video, the conflicts. The conflicts in both stories can be seen literally that it is human versus zombie. But actually, the story showed otherwise. In 28 days later, the real conflict occurred when Jim decided to slaughter all soldiers, which then led to the human versus human. In I Am Legend, even though Robert fought with the zombies, his real intention was only to find a cure. He was fighting with the virus that was ejected to human. So the conflict is actually human versus nature, or a human in disguise. I think I have covered most of the thing already. Anyway, I'm gonna leave the rest to my brother. See you again, guys.
Oh, hello guys. I think you are quite bored of my brother already. So let's quickly see the list of which cinematography we are going to look at today. First, we will have the shots, and then we are going to talk about the angles of the shots. And when we are finished with that, let's take a look at the lighting works in the films, also the compositions. And finally, we will discuss the motifs and symbols of the plots. Alright then, without wasting any more time, let's finally get started. When we talk about post-apocalypse, the first thing you probably think of is how the world is going to look like after the apocalypse. And yes, both films have the same thought. Take a look at these scenes. These scenes were mostly taken by extreme long shots to represent their own world of post-apocalypse, which, as you can see, are just the ruins of those civilizations. Now, let's take a look at another kind of shots that also highly represent post-apocalyptic theme, the close-up shots. These shots were used to focus and capture the character's emotion. For example, in 28 days later, when Jim has escaped from the execution of the soldiers, he fell to the ground. At that moment, when he looked up, he saw something. something that could stop his heavy breathing. He saw an aircraft, and in that aircraft, he saw hope. The hope of civilization, the hope of seeing the people, the hope of living and not just surviving, and the hope of being saved. Meanwhile, in I Am Legend, close-up shots were used differently. Here, take a look at the scene. Can you see how sad he is, having to kill his only friend by his own hand? He is so sad and angry that he couldn't save his friend. Okay, moving on to the next one on the list. Camera angle. But the main angle that we are going to talk about is high angle. Both films try to show that the characters are so powerless and weak, and it also shows that they are always at risk in this post-apocalyptic world.
The day before the TV and radio stopped broadcasting, there were reports of infection in Paris and
If you think how incredible it is for an angle to create that much meanings, then the lighting works might also interest you. And for lighting, the low-key lighting is very important to create a darker mood in the post-apocalyptic world.
TV, no radio.
Can you feel the gloom, the despair, and how hopeless they are?
Seen in 6 days.
The same goes for the film I Am Legend, where Robert was in despair to find his beloved dog in this place full of zombies. And here we are, the hardest and probably the most interesting of all in the list, composition. Composition is technically when the props, characters, and space are purposely arranged within the frame. I'm gonna start with this scene in I Am Legend. First of all, we call this tight framing because it represents the character with so little space around him that suggests they are being trapped because of the danger in the dark, or it could mean he is being trapped of his past, that he couldn't save humanity from the virus. And there is actually another element of composition in this scene, which is the shapes. Filmmakers usually use shapes to create some meanings, and for rectangle or square, it means a limited space and being trapped. So these scenes tend to intensify how the character was trapped in whatever the reasons that I have mentioned above. But for the second iconic scene in 28 Days Later, it is seen as loose framing, which is when the subjects are arranged in an open space, which gives the sense of, in this case, freedom, as they are now safe in this part of the country and now seeking help from any civilizations that are still safe. But looking at the shapes, this time the interpretations are quite complicated. Look at how the film arranged 3 of them triangularly in a circle. Triangles usually are evil and dangerous to see, but circles are soft and non-threatening. So, how is it going to be interpreted? Well, let me just share two of the interpretation that I have learned. 1. Maybe it would mean that even they look non-threatening on the outside, but inside they could be as dangerous and cruel like those zombies. 2. There actually a research that suggests the symbol of a triangle in a circle as a family, so it might represent the three of them as now a family. There are actually so many interpretations to be found, but right now let's move to the motif of the props. Let's again start with I Am Legend. In I Am Legend, a butterfly is a motif that represents the past, the present, and the future of humanity. The past is when he flashed back to his daughter, saying and making, "Look, it's a butterfly." And for the present is when he sees the crack of the glass door as a butterfly. And for the future is when he sees a butterfly tattoo on Anna's neck. He knew exactly that the cure he recently found will save humanity by saving Anna and giving her the cure. One interesting motif in 28 Days Later is the clothes of Jim. He began the story naked, just like the chimpanzee from the experiment. And when he put on the clothes, he actually put on the identity of what is human. Just like how the chimpanzees were forced to look at the violence conducted by humans. So when he lost his shirt in this scene, he lost his human identity and became savage, just like how the chimpanzees was infected by rage virus. Let's move on to the symbols of props. The chosen symbol for I Am Legend is the painting Starry Night that Robert sets in his living room. Starry Night was a painting by Van Gogh, and many has interpreted the painting in a lot of ways. But for this movie, I chose the interpretation of it symbolizing acceptance and hope, like how Van Gogh has finally accepted the path of his life and accept his death peacefully, just like what Robert did. It is a bit more complex for the symbol in 28 Days Later. Can you see the sculpture on the left? The sculpture is named Lao Guang. I believe it symbolizes death and agony death, a tragedy. As for why it is like that, if you look up on the story of Lao Guang, he and his sons were punished by a Greek god who sent serpents to strangle them to death in a very suffering way. Just like how most of the soldiers were killed in a very agonizing way. Actually, if you look up for the whole story of Lao Guang, there are more connected interpretations to the film. And of course, you are free to search that up if you are interested, because right now my time is over. Oh, come on, stop crying. Real guys, if you want to see us again, be sure to like and share, because maybe we'll meet again in the next video. So thank you very much and good luck.
Checkmate. Scene.